Last winter, I counted just over 460 quarts of preserved food on the shelves in my root cellar and pantry combined. Vegetables, fruits, sauces, jams, dried herbs, fermented pickles, all of it from one growing season on our homestead. That is enough to feed my wife and me from November through April without a single trip to the grocery store for produce. And I want to be honest with you, 10 years ago, I was throwing away nearly a third of my harvest every summer because I could not keep up with it. Tomatoes rotting on the counter, beans going limp in the fridge, squash sitting on the porch until it went soft. I was growing plenty of food but losing it faster than I could eat it. Then my Amish neighbor Eli, who has been putting food by for his family of 11 for as long as I have known him, walked me through his family's preservation system. Not one technique, but a complete system, timed to the rhythm of the growing season. His shelves go into winter stocked with somewhere around 800 quarts for his household, and almost nothing goes to waste between July and the first hard freeze. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how the Amish preserve their harvest to last through winter. The methods, the timing, and the specific details that make the difference between food that lasts 6 months and food that barely makes it to Thanksgiving. And stay with me to the end, because I will share a simple Amish technique for storing root vegetables without a root cellar that kept my carrots crisp well into March, even in my Zone 5 winters. Now, I will admit something that might sound familiar. For years, I treated preserving the harvest as an afterthought. I would spend months planning my garden, babying my soil, nurturing my transplants, and then when August hit and everything ripened at once, I would scramble. I would can a few batches of tomatoes in a panic, freeze some corn, maybe dry a handful of herbs, and watch the rest pile up until it's spoiled. If that sounds like your summer, you are not alone. I did it that way for close to 20 years. I thought preserving was just something you crammed in at the end of the season when the harvest overwhelmed you. Then I spent time around Eli's family during their canning season, and I saw something that completely changed my thinking. They were not rushing. They were not overwhelmed. They were calm, methodical, and weeks ahead of the curve. That is when I realized the problem was never the preserving itself. The problem was my timing and my lack of a plan. Here is something Eli told me once that stuck with me like a burr. He said, "Hank, we don't preserve food to save it. We grow food to preserve it. The pantry is the whole point of the garden." In his community in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the garden and the pantry are treated as one connected system. You do not plant a crop without knowing exactly how it will be stored. You do not harvest a bushel without knowing where it goes within 24 hours. This comes down to practical necessity. These are large families, 8, 10, 12 people at a table 3 times a day, and there is no running to the store in January when the snow is 2 feet deep and the roads are not plowed. Every jar on the shelf represents meals in February. Every bushel of potatoes in the cellar is breakfast for a month. When your family's winter nutrition depends on what you put away in summer, you do not leave it to chance, and you certainly do not waste what you grew. That mindset, treating preservation as the purpose of the garden rather than an afterthought, is the foundation everything else builds on. Now let me walk you through exactly how to set this up, starting with the piece most people skip entirely. The first thing the Amish do, and the thing I completely ignored for most of my gardening life, is plan the harvest calendar before they plant a single seed. This is not just deciding what to grow. This is deciding what to preserve, how to preserve it, and in what quantity, and then planning accordingly. Here is how to do this practically. Sit down with a piece of paper and list every vegetable and fruit you want to eat through the winter months. Next to each one, write how your family eats it most often. Tomatoes might be sauce, salsa, and diced. Green beans might be pickled and canned whole. Peppers might be frozen, dried, and fermented into hot sauce. Now estimate how many quarts or pints you need per week. For a household of 2 adults, I figured we go through about 3 quarts of canned tomatoes per week in soups, stews, chili, and pasta sauce. That is roughly 12 quarts per month times 5 months of winter, which equals 60 quarts of tomatoes minimum. So I need to plant enough tomato plants to yield 60 quarts of processed sauce and diced tomatoes, which for me is about 18 to 20 paste tomato plants, mostly San Marzano and Amish paste varieties. Eli's family does this calculation for every single crop. They know before April how many hills of butternut squash they need, how many row feet of green beans, How many heads of cabbage for sauerkraut? The conventional approach is to plant what sounds good in the seed catalog and hope for the best. The Amish approach is to reverse engineer from the pantry shelf backward to the garden bed. That one shift eliminated most of the waste I used to deal with because I stopped growing more of something than I could actually preserve. If you are in zones 3 through 5 with a shorter season, focus your preservation crops on varieties with concentrated harvest windows. Determinate tomatoes like Roma or Plum Regal ripen most of their fruit within a 2 to 3 week window, which makes canning in batches much more efficient than indeterminate types that trickle in over months. Now that your planting plan is dialed in, here is where the actual preserving work begins, and it starts earlier in the season than most people think. The Amish do not wait until the big summer harvest to start preserving. They begin in late spring and early summer with quick crops and early harvests. This is brilliant because it spreads the workload across months instead of cramming everything into August. In late May and June, when the first radishes, lettuces, and early peas come in, Eli's family is already pickling. Quick refrigerator pickles from early cucumbers and radishes go into jars with a simple brine of 1 cup white vinegar, 1 cup water, 1 tablespoon of salt, and whatever herbs are available, usually dill and garlic. These keep in the refrigerator for 3 to 4 weeks and take maybe 15 minutes to prepare. By late June, they are drying herbs. Oregano, thyme, basil, and parsley get harvested just before the plants flower, which is when the essential oil content is highest. They tie small bundles of 6 to 8 stems with kitchen string and hang them upside down in a dry, shaded area with good airflow. A covered porch works perfectly. After 7 to 10 days, the leaves crumble easily between your fingers, and you strip them into glass jars. These dried herbs last a full year and taste far better than anything from the store. The key insight here is that preservation is a season-long rhythm, not a single event. By the time the big tomato and bean harvests hit in August, you have already put away herbs, early pickles, and small batches of preserved fruit. The workload never spikes into something unmanageable. I wish someone had told me this years ago. For decades, I tried to do all my canning in 3 frantic weeks and ended up exhausted and wasteful. This next part is the backbone of Amish food preservation, and it is the skill that stores the most food per hour of work. Water bath canning is how the Amish put away high-acid foods like tomatoes, fruits, pickles, jams, and salsa. Pressure canning handles everything else. The low-acid vegetables like green beans, corn, carrots, and meat. Here is exactly what you need to get started. For water bath canning, you need a large stock pot deep enough to submerge your jars with at least 1 to 2 inches of water above the lids. A jar rack or folded kitchen towel on the bottom to keep jars off the direct heat, mason jars in quart and pint sizes, new lids every season, and rings. That is it. For tomato sauce, which is the single highest volume item in most Amish pantries, here is the process I learned from Eli's wife. Core and quarter your tomatoes. Blanch them in boiling water for 60 seconds, then transfer to ice water. The skins slip right off. Cook the skinned tomatoes in a large pot on medium heat for 20 to 30 minutes, stirring occasionally until they break down into a thick sauce. Add 2 tablespoons of bottled lemon juice per quart jar. This is not optional. It ensures the acidity is high enough for safe water bath canning. Ladle the hot sauce into hot sterilized jars, leaving 1/2 inch of headspace. Wipe the rims clean, apply lids and rings fingertip tight, and process in the boiling water. Bath for 45 minutes for quarts at elevations below 1,000 feet. If you are above 1,000 feet, add 5 minutes for every additional 1,000 feet of elevation. Now, I want to be straight with you. Canning has real food safety stakes. The Amish follow the same safe canning guidelines that the United States Department of Agriculture publishes, and you should too. Use tested recipes. Use the correct processing times. Do not take shortcuts with acidity or headspace. Eli told me once, "We have been doing this for generations, and nobody gets sick because nobody gets creative with the recipe." That is solid advice. For low-acid vegetables like green beans, you must use a pressure canner. A water bath will not reach the 240 degrees Fahrenheit needed to destroy botulism spores in low-acid foods. Pressure canners are not complicated, but you need to follow the instructions for your specific model. Process pint jars of green beans at 10 pounds of pressure for 20 minutes, or at 11 pounds if you are using a dial gauge canner. Quarts go for 25 minutes. If you are above 1,000 feet in elevation, increase pressure to 15 pounds for weighted gauge canners. What I am sharing with you today is really just one piece of a much bigger system. The first way is to click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it. The second way, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, is to take out your phone, open up your camera like you are going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching, either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. Now here is where the Amish approach really starts to separate from what most modern homesteaders do. Beyond canning, they rely heavily on 3 additional preservation methods that require zero electricity and very little equipment: fermentation, drying, and root cellaring. Understanding when to use which method for which crop is what turns a good preserver into a great one. Fermentation is the oldest preservation method the Amish use, and sauerkraut is the crown jewel. Here is exactly how Eli's family makes it. Take 1 medium head of cabbage, about 3 pounds. Remove the outer leaves and core, then shred it finely, about the thickness of a nickel. Place the shredded cabbage in a large bowl and sprinkle with 1½ tablespoons of non-iodized salt. Massage and squeeze the cabbage with your hands for about 8 to 10 minutes until it releases enough liquid to cover itself when packed tightly. Pack it firmly into a clean, wide-mouth quart jar, pressing down until the brine rises above the cabbage. Leave about 2 inches of headspace because it will bubble and expand. Weigh the cabbage down below the brine using a clean Ziploc bag filled with salted water or a small glass jar that fits inside the mouth. Cover loosely with a cloth and set it in a cool spot, ideally 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Fermentation takes about 3 to 4 weeks. You will see bubbles forming within the first 2 to 3 days, which tells you it is working. Once the bubbling slows and it tastes tangy and sour, cap it tightly and move it to cold storage. A properly fermented jar of sauerkraut lasts 6 months to a year in a cold cellar or refrigerator. The reason this works comes down to basic microbiology. The salt creates an environment where beneficial lactobacillus bacteria thrive, while harmful bacteria cannot survive. These good bacteria convert the natural sugars in the cabbage into lactic acid, which preserves the vegetable and creates that distinctive sour flavor. No vinegar needed, no cooking, no canning, just cabbage, salt, and thyme. Drying is the other workhorse method, especially for beans, peppers, herbs, and apple slices. If you do not have a commercial dehydrator, the Amish method works perfectly well. Slice apples about 1/4 inch thick. Dip them briefly in a solution of 1 tablespoon of lemon juice and arrange them in a single layer on clean window screens or wooden drying racks. Place the racks in a warm, dry, well-ventilated area. In zones 6 through 9, you can often sun-dry on a covered porch in midsummer when temperatures are above 85 degrees Fahrenheit and humidity is low. In zones 3 through 5, or during humid spells, use the lowest setting on your oven, around 170 degrees Fahrenheit, with the door cracked open an inch. Apples take 8 to 12 hours to dry fully. They should feel leathery and pliable with no wet spots when you bend them. For hot peppers, string them whole on heavy thread through the stems, spacing them about 2 inches apart, and hang them in a dry room with good airflow. These pepper strings, called ristras, will dry completely in 3 to 4 weeks and last a full year hanging in your kitchen. Dried beans are even simpler. Leave the pods on the plant until they are brown and rattling. Pull the whole plant, hang it upside down in a dry shed for 2 weeks, then shell the dried beans into glass jars. Stored in a cool, dark place, dried beans last 2 to 3 years easily. Now here is the preservation method that stores the most food with the least amount of work, and it is the one most people overlook entirely: root cellaring. The Amish store enormous quantities of potatoes, carrots, beets, turnips, winter squash, onions, and apples in root cellars. And those crops can last 4 to 6 months with zero processing. The key is temperature and humidity. Root vegetables want 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit with high humidity, around 90 to 95%. Winter squash and onions want a bit warmer, 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, with lower humidity. Apples store well at 32 to 40 degrees, but should be kept separate from vegetables because they release ethylene gas that can cause sprouting. If you have a basement with an unheated corner, you can create a simple root cellar partition using insulated walls and a vent to the outside. I built mine with basic 2x4 framing, rigid foam insulation, and a 4-inch vent pipe, and it keeps a steady 36 to 38 degrees Fahrenheit from November through March here in Zone 5. Potatoes go into burlap sacks or wooden crates lined with newspaper, not plastic. They need airflow. Carrots and beets get layered in damp sand in 5-gallon buckets. 1 layer of sand, 1 layer of roots, another layer of sand, and so on. The sand maintains humidity around the roots and keeps them from drying out or touching each other. Eli showed me this method, and I have pulled perfectly crisp carrots out of sand-stored buckets in early March. Winter squash like butternut, Hubbard, and acorn varieties need to be cured first. After harvest, set them in a warm sunny spot, about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, for 10 to 14 days. This hardens the skin and heals any small nicks. After curing, store them on shelves in your warmer storage area, not touching each other, and they will last 3 to 5 months depending on the variety. Butternut is the longest keeper of the common types. Let me share some patterns I have noticed over the years, things I used to do that cost me a lot of wasted food before I learned the Amish way. The first pattern is preserving in one big rush. I used to let everything pile up and try to can 40 quarts of tomatoes in a single weekend. I was exhausted. I cut corners and jars did not seal properly because I was rushing. The Amish spread the work from June through October, doing small batches of 4 to 6 quarts at a time, 2 or 3 times a week. It takes the same total hours, but never feels overwhelming. The second pattern is relying on the freezer for everything. I had a chest freezer packed to the brim, and when we lost power for 3 days during an ice storm, I lost nearly half of it. The Amish, who do not use electricity at all in most communities, preserve in ways that do not depend on the grid. Canned goods, fermented foods, dried goods, and root-cellared vegetables are all shelf-stable without power. That ice storm taught me a lesson I should have learned sooner. The third pattern is growing varieties that are not suited for preservation. I used to grow beefsteak tomatoes because they taste wonderful fresh, but they are watery and terrible for canning sauce. The Amish grow paste tomatoes like San Marzano, Amish paste, and Roma, specifically because they have less water, more flesh, and cook down into thick sauce with far less time on the stove. Choosing the right variety for the right preservation method saves you hours of work and gives you a better end product. The fourth pattern is not tracking what you actually use. For years, I would can whatever I had, and by spring, I would find 20 jars of pickled beets that nobody ate and 0 jars of salsa because we ran out in January. Eli's family keeps a simple tally sheet in the pantry, marking each jar as they pull it off the shelf. By the end of winter, they know exactly what to adjust for next year. I started doing this 3 years ago, and it has been one of the simplest, most useful changes I have made. Now here's something I promised you at the beginning, and it is a technique I picked up from Eli that I have never seen in any preservation guide. If you do not have a root cellar and you do not have an unheated basement, you can still store root Vegetables through winter using what Eli calls a ground clamp. It is an old method that works beautifully in zones 4 through 7. Here is exactly how to do it. Choose a well-drained spot in your yard, ideally on a slight slope so water runs away from it. Dig a shallow pit about 6 inches deep and about 3 feet in diameter. Line the bottom with a thick layer of clean straw, about 4 to 6 inches. Pile your root vegetables, carrots, beets, turnips, and parsnips on top of the straw in a cone shape, leaving the largest roots on the outside and smaller ones in the center. Cover the entire pile with another 8 to 10 inches of straw, then cover the straw with about 6 inches of soil, packing it firmly. Push a piece of PVC pipe or a bundle of straw sticking up through the top to act as a ventilation chimney. This prevents moisture buildup inside the clamp. The ground insulates the vegetables from freezing, while the straw cushions them and allows just enough airflow to prevent rot. In my Zone 5 garden, I have pulled carrots and beets from a ground clamp in early March that were nearly as firm and sweet as the day I harvested them in October. The key is making sure the vegetables are dry and unblemished when they go in. Any cut, bruise, or wet spot will cause rot that can spread through the whole clamp. Sort carefully and only store your best roots this way. This is one of those quiet old methods that most people have forgotten, but it works without electricity, without a cellar, and without spending a dime on equipment. Just straw, soil, and an understanding of how the earth holds temperature. That is the Amish approach to preserving your harvest from start to finish. Plan your preservation before you plant. Start preserving early in the season with herbs, quick pickles, and small batches. Can your high-volume crops using tested, safe methods. Ferment what ferments well, dry what dries well, and root cellar what stores well in the cold. Spread the work across the whole season so it never becomes a crisis. If you want to go deeper into this entire system, from building the soil that grows a preservation-worthy harvest, to the pest defense methods that protect it, to the water-wise layout that keeps it all running with less work. It is called the 30-Day Amish Self-Sufficient Garden Protocol, and it is everything I have learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It has got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold. And it includes the companion planting field guide, so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. Now, there are 2 easy ways to grab it. The first way is to click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it. The second way, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, is to take out your phone, open up your camera like you are going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching, either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. If any of this changed how you think about putting food by for winter, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Tell me what you are preserving this year, what has worked, what you are going to try for the first time. 460 quarts started with a plan and a conversation with a neighbor. Yours can start the same way. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I will see you in the next one.